Libertarian Party's nomination. You were the underdog there. No one thought you would win.
Not even me.
Not even you. You're from Texas, though.
I'm from Texas.
And what did you do? I mean, what was your career before this?
I had promised. Oh, I was a computer programmer and a technical trainer, and I had promised my contributors that I would make it to the Atlanta convention if I had to push the car myself. And 2 weeks before the convention, I was afraid I may have to make good on that promise because we were running out of money. We arrived at the convention, and I thought, when I got to the debate, it was Gary Nolan, Aaron Russo, and some guy from Texas.
Right. And these guys were much more famous than you, had a lot more money.
Absolutely.
One was a nationally syndicated radio
talk show host,
and the other was a
Hollywood movie
internationally known Hollywood movie producer.
And some guy that teaches a Constitution class. And so all I wanted to do was get up on the stage, talk on the C-SPAN for 90 minutes without embarrassing myself or the Libertarian Party. I had no idea how much effect I was having on the audience. I was trying to keep my answers short because I had a 90-second window to answer the questions. So I would answer the question, mention the Constitution, add some little flourish, and then sit down. I was just trying to not do a bad job, and I had no idea until the debate was over. And as I went to sit down, I looked at the audience, and the entire convention was giving me a standing ovation. That was my first clue that I had done well. And the next day, the first vote was a three-way tie. There were 12 vote difference between first and third place.
And they were all great candidates, too.
And they were.
Any of these guys, I really have to say,
yes,
not take anything away from you, any of these three guys would have been great candidates as far as I'm concerned.
That is what's so wonderful about the Libertarian Party. That we actually had three great candidates. And that's what makes my victory so much more glorious, and because I won against two men who really deserved that position. And so again, I am honored and flattered that the membership chose me to represent them. And John Earhart and I worked hard. We got 4 hours of sleep a night from that point until the election, and I only hope that I've made the Libertarian membership proud of us.
Well, you certainly have. Now, you teach a class on the Constitution.
I do.
Okay? Why don't you give us, I know it's impossible. I'm going to ask you, of course, to do impossible things on my show, but why don't you give us a little bit about the Constitution now and what you have to say about it? I mean, just, 5 minutes or so, and I can ask you some questions as we go along.
The most important concept, before we can study the Bill of Rights, you have to understand the difference between rights and privileges. A right is something that you can do without asking. A privilege is something that someone or some entity of higher authority allows you to do. So if I walk out onto my property, I can walk back and forth on my property without asking. I have a right to walk on my property. But if I want to walk to the store, which is on the other side of your property, I have to get your permission before I walk across your property. So rights and privileges are opposites. Nobody in your listening audience has a church permit.
Right.
You don't need a permit to exercise your right to freedom of religion.
Sometimes you need a speech permit if you want to have a rally or something like that.
Well, why do I have to have a concealed carry permit to exercise my right to keep and bear arms? It's really a contradiction in terms. Unfortunately, most people in the United States do not understand the Constitution. The Constitution doesn't apply to you. The Constitution doesn't apply to me.
Who does it apply to?
It applies to members of government.
So this is the rules for the government, what the government can and cannot do.
That's correct.
Not what you can and cannot do.
If you are a parent and you write a list of rules and put them on the refrigerator with a magnet, and it says you have to do your homework, you have to finish your vegetables, you have to be in bed by 9 o'clock, are you going to be tucked up in bed by 9 o'clock? Do you have to follow a curfew?
Yes.
Well,
that's what mom and dad say. I have to do what mom and dad say.
Well, if you're mom and dad, do mom and dad have to be in bed by 9 o'clock? No, they wrote the rules. We, the people, ordain and establish the Constitution. We invented Congress.
Right.
They work for us, not the other way around.
It seems to be the other way around, though, in the U.S.
I understand. And that is what the American people have to understand. We, the people, have rights. We, the people, give government privileges. And we can take those privileges away anytime we decide that it's time to do so.
So you've taught the Constitution class all over the U.S.
I have.
Okay. Now, I'm sure you've had some interesting questions and some interesting moments in this class that have happened. What are some of the ones that stick out?
I've had students say, well, I thought the government gives us our rights. Well, if somebody gives it to you, it's a privilege. It's not a right. And again, that's how they take our rights away from us. They convince us to give up our responsibilities. Or they convince us that they gave them to us in the first place so they can take them away, which is not true. I do something really unorthodox in my class. It's not usually done in public schools. I actually have students read the Constitution. And the students will read the Constitution. It says, Congress shall not do this, that, and the other. And my students will say, well, wait a minute, Congress can't do that. I said, what are you, a constitutional expert? And they said, well, no, it says Congress shall not. I said, oh, so you're literate. You think that if it says Congress shall not, that you get some idea that Congress shouldn't do that.
Why do they? Why does Congress do that? Why is America allowing the government outside of the bounds of the Constitution? Why do you think that's happening?
Because we don't know the Constitution. We have become lazy in our understanding. And because, well, he's a member of Congress. Certainly if you were violating the Constitution, somebody else would notice. I mean, you're a police officer with a badge. I mean, obviously you wouldn't tell me to do something, unless you had the authority to do that.
Right.
And the truth of the matter is that Congress and police officers will do whatever they can get away with.
Yeah, sometimes they seem to have a different copy of the Constitution than we do, the politicians, the judges.
Again, if you start with the premise that we, the people, ordain and establish the Constitution, we give government all of its privileges. If you start with that premise, how can government then turn around and give you privileges? I mean, that would be like your children allowing you to, drive the car.
So, yeah, well, I think the children are driving the car at this point. Okay, so we have about 45 seconds. If a person wants to learn something about the Libertarian Party, where can they go on the internet?
They can go to lp.org, which for the Libertarian Party. If they're interested in my book or my Constitution classes, they can go to constitutionpreservation.org.
Okay. Now, is there a phone number you can call for the Libertarian Party?
1-800-ELECT-US.
And that's toll-free, and they'll send you out some information in the mail.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for coming out.
Thank you so much.
And I hope the people out there will call those numbers, go to those websites, and learn a little more. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time on the Libertarian Alternative.
Don't give up.